Hello there, this is Jack Marshall here from the London Contemporary School of Piano, and on this video today I'm going to show you how to play 3 different James Brown grooves. We'll break down what each hand is supposed to be doing, and then we'll slowly work on putting them together, and we'll also be working with some backing tracks which you can get your hands on if you head on over to our website. That's at contemporaryschoolofpiano.com. Head on over there, grab those backing tracks, and also pick yourself up a free resource pack that's available there as well. So with that, let's start working on these grooves. Alright, so the first groove we're going to look at is from the tune Pass the Peas. It's a pretty straightforward groove, and we'll just start with the left hand. And bearing in mind that all of these left hand patterns we're going to be doing are taken from the bass player, and obviously bass has like slightly different articulations, they can play the same note with a bit more ease. So we're going to do things to dress up this left hand a bit, just to make it a bit more interesting. But for now we'll just do this really straightforward, and it's going to look like this. So all on D, and chromatically walking up to that D. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that chromatic walk starts on the 4th beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. We just hear that with the drums. Yeah, just really straightforward at the moment. No flash. Just getting the basics down. Now, as I said earlier, I wanted to make this left hand a bit more interesting. So what's quite an effective thing to do when you're transferring a bass player's line into the left hand on piano is to first acknowledge that the way they hit their notes and the way they have access to hitting those notes is different to you. So they can hit the same string with 2 different fingers, and getting that doo-doo, doo-doo, it sounds a lot smoother on a bass. So you can hit the same note with your thumb twice. Or maybe what would be better is to hit the thumb and 2nd finger. It's a little bit more reminiscent on how a bass player is playing the notes, because he's probably using his 2nd and 3rd finger to hit that do-do, do-do, like that, you know? So we can kind of emulate that. I also want to skip into some of these notes, which is where you're hitting ghost notes into your riff. So if you've got this bass line where it's going do-do, do-do, bum, 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 do-do, maybe just before I hit that C when I'm walking back, I might hit the 5th of the whole, because we're in the key of D here, so I'm hitting the 5th, so that's the A, just before I hit that C, so it looks like this. You see that, where I'm just literally just feathering. It's so light that I'm almost not even playing it. You can also put it just before the C sharp as well. Just do it really slowly once. Or you could do it indeed on all of them. Choosing when and where to do this and doing it on different spots in different parts of the groove is what kind of makes the left hand a bit more interesting. You see, so I'm doing a variation every time. It really adds to making the groove sound pretty good. So that's the left hand. So let's move on to the right hand. And the right hand is pretty straightforward, actually. You're actually playing mostly in unison with the left hand's pattern. So it's more or less exactly synced up. We link up with that, those D notes. So every time we hit D there, we're hitting a chord in our right hand. And what I used to do is this. I used to find, we're in D minor, so I used to play the triad, and I used to drop my thumb down a full tone, or a whole step, to the dominant 7th, and I would hit that. So it's like this great D minor 7 sound, really easy to find just by dropping your thumb from the triad. And if I just played it together. Now, that's more or less it, but I'm going to explain to you why this is wrong. I didn't realize until I started really listening to the guitarist in these grooves that it wasn't this sort of chord that it was being played. Bear in mind this is on guitar, not piano, the chord I'm looking at here. What the guitarist is actually doing is not playing the minor 3rd, he's actually playing the 9th instead. So he's hitting this E instead. So you've got this great sounding chord now. Anytime that left hand is hitting the D, you match it with that chord in the right hand. There's another thing you can do in the right hand where you can move everything else up a tone. This is a really common thing in James Brown grooves. You take this chord and everything moves up a whole step or tone. So the C to the D, the E to the F sharp, A to the B. And where I'm actually hitting that is on the walk back up to the D note in the left hand, because I'm playing still in unison with the D in the left hand, and then when I start walking up, so the two options, the first one is when you do it on the C sharp and it's a bit short-lived. It's quite quick. Or you can start when the C happens and then you hold it for that time, so it's a little bit longer. You just hear that with the drums. See, pretty straightforward, right? And eventually, you know, if you know how to maneuver around with your blues scale, finding moments in a groove like this where you can kind of embellish in between, that can be quite effective as well. So you find moments where your right hand is not as busy, and you know, you can just give a little phrase just to fill the gap of the groove. So you can decide how much you want to do with it. I would definitely start the groove off first and lay the floor down before you start breaking away and doing stuff like that, because the whole point is that you're establishing what the pocket is, and you want to get into that first. You know, really feel like you're sitting there comfortably. And you know, eventually, once you feel comfortable with all this, you can get a slightly faster backing. And don't forget that these will all be available on our website, so head on over there to grab these backing tracks. But when you feel comfortable with it, you know, you can start doing it with a slightly faster backing. You see, so it's quite fun when you get into it. Alright, for the second groove, we're going to look at the tune Get Up, and it's a little bit more complicated, a bit more involved, and again, we'll just start with the left hand, and it goes like this. Remember, like we said before, I've taken this from the recording and roughly what the bass player is doing. If you listen to it, he's doing variations of this sort of left hand, more or less every other repeat of the groove, right? So I've just taken a snippet of what I've heard on one time that he's done it, just to simplify it for this video. But, you know, variations and slight alternatives is definitely a big part of this. The trick of this groove is just to make sure you're starting on that one. 1, 2, 3, 4, bam, bam, bam. So this is a 2-bar groove, almost identical except for the second bar. We're dropping down to this, and again we're in E flat here, right? So this movement is basically spelling out an E flat dominant 7. Start with the E, there's the 3rd, 5th, dominant 7. So it's just hitting all the strong chord tones. And again, you just want to get that comfortable. Put that with the backing. Right, so you just want to feel comfortable when you're working through that. You just need to feel where that pulse is and how the notes land on it. So the right hand, it's really similar actually to the right hand in the previous groove, and we're going to find it in the same way. We find the triad, and we drop the thumb down a tone, and instead of the 3rd, which could be a major or minor 3rd, doesn't matter, you're going to move it to the 9th. So that's F in the context of E flat. And it's slightly different rhythm, but it's the same movement. You're going to hit this, and then you're going to move everything up a tone. So those are the 2 shapes. That's D flat, F and B flat, E flat, G and C. And the rhythm of this is as follows: 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it's almost on every single beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's just on the last one. It's just hitting just before the 4 comes in. Hear that with the backing? It might be easier to hear. You want to catch it right just before that 4th beat comes in, that last chord. 2, 3, 4. Right, so that's the pattern of the right hand there. And again, just get that comfortable on its own first. Putting it together is a little bit harder. This took me a few minutes just to kind of get my hands to understand where they land together. So just reminding of the left hand, it's doing that. And whenever I'm learning a groove where it's not as straightforward as just putting it together straight away, you have to kind of work out when things hit. I try to break down, free of any time, when it lands. So the first note and the first chord in each hand lands in unison at the start. That's the first thing that this groove is going to do, right? And just breaking it down like this is really helpful, I find. So you land together first, and then the left hand hits this afterwards. And you hit a chord with the first, just before that E flat happens twice. Let me just do this slowly. That's the first bit. The next thing that happens after that is you're going to move up that shape in your right hand where everything moves up a tone or a whole step. Now once we hit that, where your right hand moves up a whole tone each, your left hand's going to come back with this. Right, so because remember, that last little bit there is what's happening next. So it's that. Now, when you hit that final E flat in this, that's when your right hand's going to return to the same chord. That's it. So really slowly, together first. If you remember, the first half was together, and then left hand. Let me move on slightly. And then, so when you hit this chord, your left hand's going to go, and that second one, you're going to meet it with that chord. So it's, so really, really slowly, just putting it all together from the start. That's it. And again. Really, really slowly. So the only difference between that one and then the second time you do it is that on the second time you do everything identical to the first time, except just as you finish, you immediately go down to, and then you start again, right? So it's like, you have to get used to catching that. That was the bit that really threw me off when I first learned this, is getting that bit right. So just slowly. That's the first half. Second half. And that's it. That's the whole thing. All you have to do is get that right and then link them together fluently, right? Which is usually the hardest part. But we'll just try it, right? So it's... we'll try it with the backing just to hear it, how it sounds along with it. Yeah, just get in that pocket. Now you can do slight variations of this. I sometimes like to meet the left hand where it's going, where it's hitting that E flat twice. I like to also hit the right hand with two chords. It's a small adjustment, but it just helps you kind of break away from it getting perhaps too monotonous. But yeah, we could try that with a slightly faster track just to hear how it sounds up to speed. You see, so it takes a bit of work, that one, but once you get into it and you feel like you're in the pocket, it can be very satisfying. Alright, so the last and final groove we're going to look at is from one of my favourite James Brown tracks, from a tune called The Payback. Surprisingly tricky when you first try this, though. When I first learnt this, it wasn't quite as straightforward as I thought it might be. But we'll just keep doing this in the same way. We'll start with the left hand first. So this is in the key of B flat. And I'll just go into the groove, right? I know there's an intro to this, but I want to just get the grooves going on this one. So this is the left hand. 3, 4. 3, 4. 1, 2. 3, 4. 3 and 4. So really straightforward, right? If we put that with the backing very quickly, just to hear it along with the drums. Three and 4 and 3 and 4. All right, so pretty straightforward, right? It's just hitting on the first beat with that A flat, dun, 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 like that. And then what the slightly tricky part of this is just catching the B flat just before the next beat. I'm just very quickly brushing off that. All right, but it's always on the beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. like that. So da-dun, 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 4. So A flat is always landing on the beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, like that, you see. So the right hand, this is a great right hand riff that's going on, and it's just on D flat and G, and it's pivoting. We'll just keep this moving and break it, the groove up bit by bit. So the first thing, right, so it's together to start with, and then immediately in the right hand after you finish with the left, and then this is what happens next. So you hit this shape here, and then immediately hit that B flat to A flat. So it's like, and then when you carry on, so after you hit this, in between you hitting back to B flat in the left hand, you hit another one of these. So really slowly. See that? In between it. That's the movement. And then immediately it comes with it afterwards with that next chord. Can you get that right first? Right, sometimes it's just good to just loop the first half of something. We'll keep moving forward. Then you immediately hit this pivot where you're moving up a semitone each. So D flat to D, G to G sharp. And then as soon as you hit that pivot, you come in with the left hand, the B flat, and then you meet together then with A flat and that, and landing back down to the original shape. So very slowly. And then you're there. And then the last little bit of this now, you finish in the left hand with the B flat, and then hit the right hand shape again. So all of that together for a moment, and then we obviously do this little bit at the end, but you hit that that last bit twice. Sorry, I beg your pardon. So it's that. And then that's just all on its own. Yeah, right? Obviously, like we said in the last two grooves, there's variations. You can do slightly different things, but this is probably tricky enough just to get this right to start with. So really slowly. Really slowly. Right, so you just need to find the correct speed that is right for your hands to just be able to play it without fail. And sometimes that is very, very slow. So just, you know, whatever the golden tempo is, that's the correct speed. Because you just want to get your hands used to how to move, and then you can bring the speed up. So even if it's... if it's that speed, then that's the correct speed. You know, there's nothing wrong with being... It's better to be slow and right than fast and wrong. So if we just try this with the backing now. Alright, so a bit of a wolf in sheep's clothing, that groove. It's trickier than it first seems to get that together. But once you get it locked in, the correct pattern between the two hands, just work on bringing that speed up. Just like we've said in previous videos and in the previous grooves we were doing on this video as well. Just get the pattern first and then just bring the speed up as we go. So those were the three grooves. Remember, if you want those backing tracks that we've been working with, then you can head on over to our website at contemporaryschoolpiano.com. Get the backing tracks that we're working with there, or a free resource pack, or indeed if you want to inquire about some teaching, then you can head on over there as well and send us an email. So thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you found it useful, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Cheers.